commander of the Empire, had witnessed 1,000 battles across the galaxy. His 4 eyes had seen the disciplined formations of the crystal-born Selenites, the brutal efficiency of the metal-clad, and the terrifying swarm tactics of the hive clusters. Yet nothing had prepared him for what he observed on the battlefield of 442B that day. The humans called it New Verdant. To the Empire, it was simply Resource Node 7749, rich in quantum crystals and marked for extraction. The indigenous human colony of 50,000 souls was considered a minor obstacle, easily swept aside by the Empire's third assault fleet. After all, these Earthborn had only been expanding into space for barely 2 centuries. What could such primitives do against the might of an empire that had conquered galaxies for? Positioned his observation craft in the upper atmosphere, well beyond the range of human weapons. From this vantage point, he would record the inevitable victory for the Empire's war archives. The battle would be brief, clinical, and serve as another example of superiority. Or so he believed. The first anomaly appeared during the initial bombardment phase. Standard Imperial doctrine called for orbital strikes to eliminate defensive positions before ground forces deployed. The humans had constructed what appeared to be primitive bunker networks across their primary settlement. Watched as the energy beams lanced down from the dreadnoughts, expecting to see the usual pattern of complete destruction followed by panicked surrender. Instead, something impossible happened. The human fortifications absorbed the bombardment, not deflected, not shielded, but absorbed. Through his sensors, could detect massive energy signatures building beneath the surface. The humans had somehow converted their defensive positions into energy collection arrays, storing the very power meant to destroy them. Fascinating, murmured to his recording device. The humans appear to have weaponized defensive tactics, primitive yet efficient. The ground assault began with 3,000 shock troopers descending in atmospheric. These elite warriors stood 8 feet tall, their chitinous armor gleaming purple-black in the alien sun. Each carried plasma weapons capable of melting through reinforced starship hulls. They had never known defeat. As the touched down in perfect formation, expected to see the familiar sight of humans fleeing in terror. Instead, he witnessed something that made his secondary heart skip a beat. The humans were running toward the landing zones. At first, this seemed like the suicidal desperation of an inferior species, then began to understand the tactical implications. The humans had waited for the exact moment when his warriors were most vulnerable during deployment. As soldiers emerged from their transports, they found themselves surrounded by human fighters who had somehow crossed impossible distances in the span of mere minutes. The speed was unnatural. Physiology allowed for quick, precise movements, but these humans moved like liquid death across the battlefield. They carried primitive kinetic weapons, projectile throwers that should have been ineffective against advanced armor. Yet somehow these crude guns were punching through battle suits as if they were paper. Through his enhanced sensors, analyzed the phenomenon. The humans had modified their weapons with the energy they had absorbed from the orbital bombardment. Each bullet carried a charge of pure electromagnetic fury, turning simple metal projectiles into armor-piercing devastation. They had taken the Empire's own power and reflected it back with interest. But it was not just the weapons that understanding. It was the way the humans fought. Military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force applied with mathematical precision. Every movement was calculated, every assault followed established patterns proven over countless campaigns. The humans fought like controlled chaos made manifest. They seemed to predict movements before they happened, flowing around attacks like water around stone, then striking back with devastating accuracy. A squad of veterans, each with over 50 years of combat experience, advanced on what appeared to be a damaged human position. Standard tactical analysis suggested an easy victory. Instead, watched in horrified fascination as the humans transformed the very environment into a weapon. Improvised explosives erupted from beneath the ground, not to destroy, but to blind and confuse. While his warriors stumbled through smoke and debris, humans emerged from positions that should have been impossible to reach, striking with those modified kinetic weapons before vanishing again. The most unsettling aspect was their apparent disregard for their own safety. Culture valued survival above all else. Individual warriors were assets to be preserved and utilized efficiently. These humans seemed to view their own lives as just another tool to be spent wisely. They would sacrifice themselves without hesitation if it meant taking multiple enemies with them, but they did so with cold calculation rather than berserk fury. One human, wounded and surrounded by 6 soldiers, somehow eliminated all of his attackers using nothing but a damaged weapon and what appeared to be a common construction tool. The tactical recordings showed him using the environment, his enemy's own momentum, and split-second timing to turn a hopeless situation into victory. When reinforcements arrived, they found 6 elite warriors dead and the human calmly treating his own wounds with battlefield medical supplies. As the first hour of combat concluded, instruments showed casualty ratios that all military logic. The humans were outnumbered 6-1, using inferior weapons and primitive equipment. By every rational calculation, they should have been annihilated within minutes. Instead, his forces had lost nearly 30% of their strength, while the humans continued to fight with undiminished effectiveness. "This requires further observation," spoke into his recorder, his voice betraying none of the growing unease he felt. "The Earthborn appear to possess tactical adaptations not documented in previous encounters. Recommend additional analysis before deployment of secondary assault waves." But even as he spoke those clinical words, knew he was witnessing something that would change his understanding of warfare forever. These humans fought as if death itself was merely another enemy to be outmaneuvered. They turned every disadvantage into opportunity, every weakness into hidden strength. And this was only their opening gambit. The real battle had yet to begin, and already found himself questioning everything the Empire had taught him about inferior species and inevitable victory. The humans had just demonstrated that superior technology meant nothing against superior adaptation. Now, as he watched them regroup and prepare for the next phase of combat, he began to understand why ancient records spoke of the Earthborn with something that might have been fear. Whatever came next, knew he was about to witness something unprecedented in the galaxy's long history of warfare. The humans were not just fighting for survival. They were teaching the universe a lesson about what it meant to be underestimated. And the lesson was written in blood. The second wave arrived with the fury of a dying star. Admiral Or himself descended from the flagship, bringing with him 5,000 of the Empire's most elite units. The Void Reapers, warrior priests who had never tasted defeat in 3 centuries of conquest. Their black armor absorbed light itself, and their weapons could crack moon surfaces. Surely these primitive Earthborn would crumble before such might. Adjusted his sensors, focusing on the human settlements below. What he observed every tactical manual in the Imperial archives. The humans had not retreated to fortified positions as any rational species would. Instead, they had spread across the entire continent, creating what appeared to be a massive interconnected network of mobile fighting positions. Through quantum communication arrays that should have been far beyond their technological capabilities, every human fighter was connected to every other. When Void Reapers landed in one sector, humans 3 continents away immediately began moving to support positions they should not have known were needed. It was as if the entire human population had become a single, vast organism dedicated to warfare. But the true horror began when the Void Reapers encountered human children. Imperial doctrine clearly stated that young of any species would flee from combat or cower in protective positions. These human offspring, some appearing no older than 12 standard years, emerged from concealed positions carrying weapons nearly as large as themselves. They moved with the same impossible coordination as the adults, their small size allowing them to navigate terrain that larger warriors could not access. Watched in stunned silence as a group of human children, no more than 20 individuals, systematically eliminated a squad of Void Reapers using tactics that belonged in advanced military academies. They had turned the very landscape into a weapon, using gravity, momentum, and timing to create killing zones that existed only for the brief moments when enemies were most vulnerable. The young exhibit combat capabilities equivalent to seasoned Imperial veterans, recorded, his voice maintaining professional detachment despite his growing discomfort. This suggests systematic military training from birth or possibly genetic modifications for combat effectiveness. Yet as he continued to observe, realized that neither explanation was correct. These humans were not genetically modified super soldiers or products of military indoctrination. They were simply adapting to circumstances with a speed and creativity that should have been impossible. A human child, cornered by 3 Void Reapers, somehow convinced them to destroy each other through a combination of reflected energy blasts and precisely timed movements. The tactical recordings showed her using nothing but debris and timing to turn superior firepower against itself. When asked later by adult humans how she had accomplished this feat, the child simply replied that the armored enemies were too big to change direction quickly. That was when began to understand the true nature of what he was witnessing. These humans were not just fighting. They were learning. Every engagement taught them something new about their enemies, and they incorporated that knowledge instantly into their tactics. What had started as primitive resistance was evolving into something far more dangerous. The Void Reapers, accustomed to enemies who fought according to predictable patterns, found themselves facing opponents who seemed to invent new forms of warfare with each passing hour. Traditional flanking maneuvers were countered by tactics that had never been recorded in any military database. Superior firepower was neutralized by positioning strategies that appeared to violate basic physics. Admiral Orr, growing frustrated by the unexpected resistance, authorized the deployment of heavy mechanized units. Colossal war machines, each the size of a building, descended from orbit. Their shields could withstand bombardment from capital ships. Their weapons could level cities. Against such overwhelming force, even these adaptable humans would surely surrender. The mechanized assault began at dawn on the second day. 50 walking fortresses advanced across the primary continent, their sensors locked onto human population centers. Each machine carried enough firepower to reduce a city to ash, operated by veteran crews who had crushed rebellions across dozens of worlds. The humans' response was unlike anything in experience. Rather than attempting to flee or hide from the mechanical giants, they ran toward them. But they did not attack the machines directly. Instead, they began attacking the ground beneath the war machines' feet. Using the energy they had continued to harvest from orbital bombardments, human engineers had created seismic charges powerful enough to destabilize geological structures. As the heavy walkers advanced, the very terrain beneath them began to shift and crack. What should have been solid ground became quicksand, sinkholes, and unstable surfaces that could not support the massive machine's weight. Watching 50 million credit war machines sink helplessly into Earth felt something he had never experienced before: genuine fear of an enemy's tactical capabilities. The humans had not defeated superior technology through force. They had simply made it irrelevant. But the mechanical assault revealed something even more disturbing about human nature. As each war machine became trapped, human fighters emerged from concealed positions to board the disabled giants. They moved across the hulls like parasites, finding access points and infiltrating the heavily armored machines from within. The recordings from inside the war machines showed scenes that would haunt for the rest of his existence. Humans, using nothing but hand tools and improvised weapons, systematically disabled systems that should have been impossible for primitives to understand. They seemed to instinctively comprehend complex mechanical systems after only moments of observation. More unsettling still was their treatment of captured crews. Rather than execute their prisoners, as was standard military practice, the humans began interrogating them, not through torture or coercion, but through simple conversation. Within hours, soldiers were providing detailed information about Imperial tactics, technology, and strategic plans. The humans exhibit psychological manipulation capabilities beyond recorded parameters, noted with growing unease. Enemy personnel are voluntarily providing classified information after minimal interaction. Recommend immediate psychological conditioning review for all Imperial forces. The truth was more disturbing than mere manipulation. The humans were simply treating their enemies as individuals rather than abstract threats. This basic recognition of personhood somehow bypassed of Imperial indoctrination, creating doubt and sympathy where none should have existed. By the end of the second day, Admiral Orr's overwhelming assault force had been reduced to isolated pockets of resistance hiding in reinforced positions. The humans had not achieved victory through superior strength or technology. They had won through adaptation, creativity, and an apparently infinite capacity for learning from their enemies. As night fell over the battlefield, observed something that challenged his fundamental understanding of warfare. The humans were not celebrating their victories or preparing for continued conflict. Instead, they were tending to wounded enemies alongside their own casualties, sharing medical supplies and food with prisoners who had attempted to exterminate them hours earlier. Human post-combat behavior suggests psychological deficiency in standard survival instincts, he recorded mechanically. But even as he spoke those words, knew they were wrong. This was not deficiency. This was something entirely new in his experience. The humans were demonstrating that strength did not require cruelty, that victory did not demand vengeance. They fought like demons when threatened, but showed mercy to defeated foes. It was a combination of traits that should have been contradictory, but somehow made them more formidable than any purely military force. As prepared his reports for Imperial Command, he found himself struggling to find words that would adequately convey what he had witnessed. How could he explain that 50,000 primitives had effectively neutralized 2 waves of elite Imperial forces without resorting to the brutality that defined civilized warfare? More importantly, how could he warn his superiors that these humans represented something far more dangerous than a military threat? They were a fundamental challenge to everything the Empire understood about power, conquest, and the natural order of the galaxy. And somewhere in the growing darkness below, he could see lights moving across the battlefield. Humans were still working, still adapting, still preparing for whatever came next. They had proven that superior technology could be overcome. Now they were demonstrating that superior numbers might be equally meaningless. The third wave would bring the full might of the Imperial Navy. Found himself hoping that would be enough to end this before the humans taught the galaxy any more uncomfortable lessons about the nature of true strength. The third day brought devastation from the heavens themselves. The entire Third Fleet, over 200 capital ships, had repositioned to eradicate New Verdant completely. No more surgical strikes or limited deployments. The Emperor himself had issued the order: reduce the planet to molten rock and be done with these troublesome primitives. Admiral Orr, his pride wounded by 2 days of unexpected defeats, had requested permission to glass the entire world. The humans had proven too unpredictable for conventional conquest, so conventional conquest would be abandoned in favor of total annihilation. Watched from his observation post as the fleet prepared for synchronized bombardment. Every weapon in the Imperial arsenal would fire simultaneously, delivering enough energy to crack tectonic plates and boil oceans. No defense could withstand such overwhelming force. The humans would finally learn their place in the cosmic order, even if that lesson came in their final moments. The bombardment began at precisely 600 local time. 200 ships unleashed the fury of collapsing stars upon a single world. Energy beams capable of melting asteroids lanced through the atmosphere. Quantum torpedoes that could shatter moons struck the surface in synchronized waves. The very air caught fire as unimaginable energies poured down like rain. For 10 minutes, the assault continued without pause. When the weapons finally fell silent, the fleet sensors showed exactly what Admiral Orr had expected. A world transformed into a sphere of molten glass, its surface temperatures exceeding those of most stellar cores. "Target eliminated," reported the fleet's tactical officer. "No life signs detected. New Verdant has been successfully neutralized." Admiral Orr allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The humans had been clever, certainly, and more adaptable than anticipated. But in the end, sheer destructive force had proven superior to primitive ingenuity. The Empire's reputation remained intact. Then the impossible happened. Energy signatures began appearing across the planet's surface. Not random heat dispersal from the bombardment, but organized, purposeful emissions. Through the superheated atmosphere, shapes began to emerge. Structures that should not have existed were rising from the molten surface like islands emerging from a burning sea. "Sensor malfunction," Admiral Orr declared immediately. "Recalibrate all detection arrays." But independent sensors confirmed what the fleet was detecting. The humans had not merely survived the bombardment. They had used it. Every joule of energy that should have destroyed them had instead been channeled into the most audacious engineering project he had ever witnessed. The humans had built a planetary defense grid using the Empire's own weapons fire as a power source. While the surface burned, massive machines had emerged from deep underground bunkers, their surfaces gleaming with energy absorption arrays. They had literally eaten the bombardment and converted it into something else entirely. "This is impossible," Admiral Orr whispered, his composure finally cracking. "Nothing can survive that level of concentrated firepower." Through his enhanced sensors, watched as the true scope of human preparation revealed itself. The bunkers they had observed were not simple shelters. They were manufacturing centers, powered by geothermal energy and now supercharged by Imperial weapons. During the bombardment, while their planet burned above them, humans had been mass-producing defensive systems using technologies that should have been beyond their reach. But they had not simply Imperial technology, they had improved it. The energy cannons that emerged from the molten surface fired projectiles that moved faster than Imperial sensors could track. When the first shots struck the fleet's flagship, the shields simply ceased to exist. Not overloaded, not depleted, but fundamentally altered at the quantum level until they could no longer maintain cohesion. Impossible, Admiral or repeated as his ship's defensive systems failed in ways that violated basic physics. Our shields are impervious to kinetic weapons. That was when the human transmission reached the fleet. A single voice, speaking in perfectly accented Imperial standard, broadcast across all frequencies simultaneously. Admiral, or this is Commander Sarah of the new Verdant Defense Force. We've been analyzing your technology for the past 3 days. Thank you for providing us with such comprehensive field data during your bombardment. We've made several improvements to your basic designs. The voice was calm, professional, almost friendly. It was the tone one might use when discussing minor technical modifications, not revolutionary advances in weapons technology. Your energy shields operate on quantum frequency harmonics that create predictable resonance patterns, Commander continued conversationally. We've developed projectiles that match and amplify those patterns, causing catastrophic interference. Your ship's hulls use crystalline matrix reinforcement that becomes brittle when exposed to specific electromagnetic frequencies. We've adjusted our energy weapons accordingly. Watched in horrified fascination as human weapons systematically dismantled the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. Each shot was precisely calculated to exploit weaknesses that Imperial engineers had never imagined could exist. 100-year-old shield generators failed in seconds. Armor plating that had withstood singularity impacts cracked like ancient pottery. But the true genius was not in the weapons themselves. It was in how the humans coordinated their assault. Every ship in the Imperial fleet was targeted simultaneously by multiple ground installations, but not randomly. Each vessel received exactly the amount of firepower necessary to disable it without destroying the crew. We don't want to hurt anyone unnecessarily, Commander's voice continued. We've calculated minimum force requirements to neutralize your offensive capabilities while preserving life support systems. Please prepare for immediate evacuation to planetary surface, where we can provide medical assistance to any injured personnel. It was not a threat. It was not even a warning. It was simply a statement of fact delivered with the calm confidence of someone who held absolute tactical superiority. Admiral, or his flagship dying around him, managed to activate his personal communication array. How? He demanded, his voice cracking with disbelief. How did primitives accomplish this? The response came immediately, as if Commander had been expecting the question. We learned from you, Admiral. Every shot you fired taught us something new about your technology. Every soldier you sent showed us your tactical limitations. Every conversation with your prisoners revealed your strategic weaknesses. You gave us a comprehensive education in Imperial military doctrine, then provided us with the power source necessary to surpass it. Realized that he was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had not simply defeated a superior foe. They had evolved beyond the need for victory as traditionally understood. They had transformed warfare itself from destruction into education. We don't want your empire, Commander continued. We don't want conquest or tribute or submission. We just want to be left alone to live our lives in peace. But if anyone ever again decides to threaten our children, our families, our freedom, remember what happened here today. The human weapons fell silent, their message delivered with terrible clarity. 200 Imperial warships hung powerless in space, their crews unharmed but utterly defeated. On the surface below, 50,000 humans had proven that intelligence, adaptability, and pure stubborn determination could overcome any technological advantage. Admiral, or his pride shattered along with his fleet, managed one final transmission. What are you? Commander's response would echo through Imperial intelligence reports for generations to come. We're human, we adapt, we learn, we protect what matters to us, and we never ever give up. As rescue shuttles began launching from the disabled Imperial fleet, found himself struggling to process what he had witnessed. The humans had not won through superior firepower or advanced technology. They had won through something far more dangerous: the absolute refusal to accept defeat combined with an unlimited capacity for growth. The Empire had spent conquering species that fought according to predictable patterns: overwhelming force against static defenses, advanced technology against primitive weapons, disciplined military doctrine against desperate resistance. The humans had revealed the fundamental flaw in this approach. They did not fight to win. They fought to learn. Every engagement made them stronger, smarter, more dangerous. Defeat was simply data to be analyzed and incorporated into future strategies. As filed his final report, he realized that the Empire faced a choice. They could leave these humans alone and pretend this encounter had never happened. Or they could continue to challenge them and watch as every defeat taught them new ways to defend themselves. The humans had not conquered anything. They had simply demonstrated that conquest itself might be an obsolete concept when faced with a species that treated every challenge as an opportunity for growth. Watching the rescue operations below, seeing Imperial soldiers receiving medical care from the same humans who had defeated them hours earlier, understood why ancient records spoke of Earthborn warriors with such reverence. It was not their ferocity that made them dangerous. It was their mercy. It was not their weapons that made them unstoppable. It was their willingness to learn from their enemies instead of simply destroying them. The heavens feared them not because they were conquerors, but because they represented something far more threatening to established order. The possibility that strength and wisdom could exist in the same species, that victory could be achieved without cruelty, that the universe itself could be changed through nothing more than the refusal to accept limitations. As his observation craft departed New Verdant, knew he had witnessed the end of an era. The age of conquest through superior force was over. The humans had proven that adaptation would always triumph over static power. And somewhere in the galaxy, other species would soon learn what the Empire had discovered too late. Underestimating humanity was not just a mistake. It was an education delivered with interest.